I hate being the YouTuber who suckles the teat of gaming controversy in the gaming community, but I can't sit on the sidelines with Mario and Luigi Brothership. Mario and Luigi Brothership might be one of the most controversial Nintendo releases of the year, or well, ever. Oh boy, I couldn't ignore it if I tried. One side is calling it a misunderstood masterpiece, while the other is screaming flop of the year, like IGN. IGN decided to throw gas on the fire by dropping a hilariously low score, which I genuinely think was some sort of online publicity stunt, because some of their complaints are actually so stupid. But we'll talk about them directly, because in this video, I don't want to take the typical approach of reviewing this game, as you can get a slew of those basic reviews all over the internet. In fact, we're going to be comparing my opinion with the reviews and see if some of these reviews have valid points, or if they're just being way overly critical and they just don't like Mario and Luigi for some reason. First, let's talk about the stakes here. If you're a fan of the Mario and Luigi series in any capacity, you know this isn't just any new game. It's the first original entry in over a decade. That's 10 long years since we got something fresh from the series. And also the first entry to debut on a home console like the Switch. And let's not forget about the messy path that brought us here. There was a lot of speculation that this series would never return, as a series that made all the previous entries known as Alpha Dream went bankrupt after their last two games, Superstar Saga Remake and Bowser's Inside Story Remake, completely tanked on the 3DS. To be fair, it wasn't entirely their fault. Nintendo released them on the 3DS just as the Switch was taking over. My point is, Alpha Dream got cooked. So imagine the collective hype when Nintendo announced Brothership during a Nintendo Direct and slated it for holiday 2024. Oh my! Dang. That looks fantastic! Could this be the comeback we'd all been waiting for? The game would be developed by Acquire this time around, the team known mainly for their work on RPGs such as Octopath Traveler. Heck, there are also some ex-Alpha Dream employees who decided to help with this game as well, just to make sure this game would have the classic Mario and Luigi vibe fans of the series craved. The bar was being set high, baby. Now, the game released, and the story's plot isn't exactly revolutionary, but hey, it's a Mario game. The premise is that some big mystical unit tree gets destroyed, shattering the balance of the world. Mario and Luigi have to reconnect scattered islands to the ship, grow a new tree, and save the day by restoring world peace. That's a very basic and brief description of the game story, so there you go. The story doesn't take itself too seriously, leaning heavily into its quirky, over-the-top humor. It's full of colorful characters and bizarre situations. It's silly, but it works. Brothership sticks to the traditional gameplay tropes from the other games in this series, while introducing a few new ideas. You'll take control as Mario, with Luigi tagging along in the overworld. You jump with A for Mario and B with Luigi. As you explore the map, you'll uncover new story details, encounter enemies, and solve fun little puzzles. Again, all classic Mario and Luigi elements you'd expect. They even brought back power-ups in the overworld, like how Mario and Luigi can turn into a UFO. This looks incredibly painful. These are good additions to the game and remind me a lot of the funny power-ups from the previous entries. It's ridiculous, but it's Mario. Ridiculous is half the charm. It might not make canonical sense why they can turn into a UFO, but hey, I'm not complaining. As you explore, you'll encounter enemies which will bring you to the battling screen. This is where the RPG side of things kick in. Mario and Luigi can jump on enemies, smash them with hammers, use items, and use bros attacks, like the red shell and green shell, just like they always have in past installments. One new addition is the battle plug mechanic. As you collect sparks from the overworld areas, you'll be able to create these battle plugs. Once you create a battle plug, you can use them in battle a certain amount of times before they need to be recharged. These are customizable power-ups that give you a unique advantage in fights, like making dodging enemies easier or splashing damage to adjacent enemies. It's a really cool addition that I actually like, though the recharge mechanic feels a little unnecessary, as it's a feature that allows me to be creative and makes the gameplay a little more dynamic. So why limit that? Those are the basics. But now, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say elephants. The first gripe that people tend to bring up is the writing. Now, it's a Mario game, people. It's supposed to be enjoyed by children as well. I never really go into a Mario game with that high expectations. We're so used to Peach just being kidnapped by Bowser and calling it a day. Now, this is an RPG, so obviously they have to put a little more emphasis into the story, and I get it. But I think it's fine. The story is good enough. I really don't understand why people don't like it. I think it mainly has to do with the overall pace of the game, but we'll get back to that. There's some really good stories in games like Mario RPG and Bowser's Inside Story. I just never found it that big of a deal, unless it's just something completely awful that I just can't stand. And for Brothership, we've seen a lot of split opinions with the story, and critics have not been kind, such as over at Digital Trends. The review heavily criticizes the narrative for being virtually devoid of wit, noting that the writing barely got a giggle over the course of 45 hours. It also mentions that the inhabitants of Concordia often feel devoid of personality, serving more as a guide than adding depth to the world. At IGN, the reviewer describes the dialogue as ridiculously chatty and boring, contributing to an incredibly disappointing revival of the series. The critic emphasizes mentions that the game fails in almost every way to recapture the magic of the best Mario & Luigi games. And Polygon's review points out that the story isn't particularly compelling, with the humor often falling flat. It mentions that the game seems to recognize its reliance on bad puns and dad jokes, leading to moments of dead silence and characters groaning at the jokes. Okay, I get their points a little bit. They're not completely wrong. Yes, certain characters won't shut up, and yes, some jokes are corny and fall flat. But we also have to mention that this game is enjoyed by kids, and that's most likely the main demographic that they're trying to hit. The Mario & Luigi games have always been goofy. That's part of the appeal. I'm not making an excuse that this game shouldn't be funny. I'm just saying I think it's funny enough for its intended audience. To be fair, yes, I did find a lot of the jokes to be repetitive. For example, the "I'm not a pig" line that our main sidekick keeps saying. Nobody has called you a pig. Stop bringing it up. Pigs aren't even in this universe, so why would anyone even care? Those are hogs! Anyways, that was dumb. I do agree. The pig line, get the heck out of here. What are you doing? But I didn't find the bulk of the writing to be pointless. If anything, a lot of the time, the dialogue adds personality to the characters. Maybe in some section it goes on a bit long, but I never found it to be overwhelming. Let's not dismiss that a lot of these reviewers don't have the same patience as casual gamers. Reviewers have a stack of other games to get through and sometimes just need to crank a review out before the deadline. And when there's a lot of dialogue they probably aren't particularly invested in, it can definitely feel like it drags on. I think the writing is fine for what it is. The story is deep enough to keep me engaged with it, even if it isn't the most dynamic one. It's goofy enough and intriguing enough for me to care, and that's what matters. Besides, there's a fast forward button if you don't want to listen to all the chattiness. You can also just spam A to skip the dialogue. This way to skip dialogue is also much better than some other Mario & Luigi games if you had played them. So while these reviewers' complaints shouldn't be entirely dismissed, they might have been going a little too hard on this, all things considered. Now that the plot is out of the way, we need to talk about the pacing. I'm all for shorter games, especially as someone who plays a lot for my channel. Very often I won't even touch a game if I know it's going to be over 50 hours. That's a lot of time to invest into a game that I just don't have that much time to put into it. Obviously, there are some exceptions for games that I'm really hyped for, but this is usually why it's hard for me to get into massive RPGs like Persona or even Xenoblade. Now, Mario RPGs generally tend to be on the shorter side when compared to the average RPG, ranging anywhere from 10 to 25 hours. This game, on the other hand, is long, like 35 to 45 hours long. That's a lot for a Mario game. Normally, I love a good 10 to 20 hour RPG, but this one overstays its welcome in a few places. But let's look at some of the reviews to see what they have to say about the pacing, and then I'll share my opinion on if I agree or not. At IGN, the reviewer criticizes the game for ridiculously chatty dialogue, overbearing hand-holding, and boring runtime padding fetch quests. RPG Site reflects on the game's extended runtime, tiresome pacing, and overabundant tutorials, drawing parallels to the previous titles in the series. And GameSpot points out that Brothership seemed intent on hitting a lengthier playtime, and it just can't sustain itself for that long, indicating that the game's pacing issue stems from its extended duration. Now I get that. I get it. In my opinion, this game definitely has some pacing issues. Especially in the first 5 hours or so, it takes a while to get to the core gameplay elements. And it made the earlier battles feel a little boring, especially if you're a veteran to the series. Now, talking about the chatty dialogue and the tutorials, this is something that has been in almost every Mario & Luigi game, especially Dream Team. That was heavily criticized in that game. So the fact that we can fast forward some things and skip dialogue is a huge dub for this kind of a game. Mario & Luigi games have always been like this, and that's what fans like. So one side, yes, I get the long chatty dialogue, but I think that most of the time it adds quite a bit to the story. Now, that's not to say it's perfect. Yes, there are some pacing issues with this game. Gameplay-wise, like, overstays its welcome just a touch. But I think overall, the pace of the game is pretty jam-packed. Like, I didn't find the pacing to be that horrible, like I said, except for a few little places or areas. I didn't mind the pacing. Now let's talk a little bit more about the gameplay. One thing I have mixed feelings about is Luigi's role. My personal opinion is that this probably could have been improved. This Paisano gets a new mechanic called Luigi Logic. By tapping the L button, you can send him to do specific tasks, and most of the time, this works as expected. I never really had a problem with the AI that was controlling him, but this kind of made me feel like I wasn't actually the one playing as Luigi. The entire game, you control Mario, and Luigi just sort of follows you and does his own thing. This makes it feel like a Mario game with Luigi instead of a Mario and Luigi game. Also, some of these Luigi logic moves, on paper they sound like a cool way to expand on his character, but in reality it makes him feel off. Luigi's whole deal is that he's clumsy and a little helpless. Wouldn't it make more sense if Mario was the one doing that, since he's the one with the smart genes? And I wasn't the only one who felt this way. IGN criticizes how Luigi's handled, stating that he feels more like an NPC ally than a second protagonist. It mentions that Luigi follows Mario at a disconnected, awkward distance, and that many puzzles involve simply ordering Luigi to automatically do something for you, which diminishes the unique style of previous games. I think it probably would have been pretty cool to just be able to play as Luigi or separate the characters in general, or maybe if they included some sort of captain thing where you can send one captain over there and the other thing, like what they did in Pikmin 3. I don't know if I'm just blabbering or if that would even work, but I just think that would have been pretty cool. It's just the fact that when you send Luigi to do some sort of automatic AI thing, he feels even less of a playable character, if that makes any sense. Now, let's get to the most frustrating part. Usually first-party Nintendo games don't suffer from trashy performance on the Nintendo Switch, because the games are designed and optimized for this console only. So when a first-party Nintendo game performs badly, it really stands out. With this console pushing almost 8 years now, the power is obviously lacking. A lot of people complain that frame rate drops are frequent, and yes, you can definitely tell that it is, but I don't normally find it nearly as bad as some people said. I usually say that 30 frames per second isn't bad, as long as it's consistent, and yes, while this isn't completely consistent, it's consistent enough that I think that untrained eyes or gaming newbies would probably not even notice it. Yes, my expertly trained gamer eyes did notice it, but it wasn't nearly as bad as some people said it was. And not nearly as noticeable as something like Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Like in that game, it was bad. It's just sad that Nintendo was making these massive games that even their own console can't handle. It blows my mind that games like Mario Odyssey ran at 1080p 60 frames per second, and this game can't, especially with the more simplistic art style this game chose. A big part that could be contributing to this game's performance and graphics is the fact it's made in Unreal Engine, which is notorious for not running the best on Nintendo Switch. And while the visuals are vibrant and are absolutely suitable for a Mario Switch game, they don't look as polished as we've come to expect from this series. Like, most textures on the ground are noticeably low resolution, extremely pixelated to the point where I'm not even sure why they're there. The overall resolution is fine, but still lower compared to what more modern gamers are used to, even without looking at reviews. I'll say the biggest drawback with the performance has to be the load times. With how long each load screen is and the amount of them there are, it just starts to add up. There's a load screen when you start a battle and another when you finish a battle, every single time. Near the end of the game, I kind of found myself not wanting to engage with that many battles because of just how long it would take. I like the whole battle system overall, I just didn't like waiting for them. While they aren't a complete deal breaker for the game, it just doesn't feel like they should be this long, especially in comparison to where we are in the gaming industry as a whole. The only reason I really noticed how bad these load screens were this time around is because I've been playing my PS5 a lot more recently, and seeing how fast my PS5 loads stuff always impresses me, especially when those games are way more graphically advanced. And I think this is a big problem all of us Switch users are facing right now. We all know the system is getting old, but we're definitely starting to feel how old it is currently. And with the standards of the industry changing, it's actually just becoming a chore to play the Switch, and a lot of the hardcore audience isn't even interested in playing games on this anymore. To be honest, it kind of boggles my mind why they wouldn't have waited for the next console to release this game in a much better state. Yes, I know this is a big holiday game, but they just could have worked out a few kinks here. I think we are starting to see that a lot of Switch users are just done with their systems, as the games haven't really been selling that great in the first few weeks. Actually, this game undersold both Mario RPG and the Thousand Year Door remake in the first week. Also, this is the third Mario RPG within a year, and I think a lot of fans, including myself, are kind of suffering from the Mario RPG burnout. And I think this is also contributing to where game reviewers are coming from. In the reviews for Mario Luigi Brothership, performance issues are a common point of criticism. For instance, IGN highlights shockingly bad performance issues that distract at nearly every turn, noting that the game suffers from performance issues, particularly when moving water, lava, sand, wind, or fog are present, leading to frame rate issues while exploring the overworld. Shockingly bad? I don't think it's shocking at this point. I get it, but again, like I mentioned, it's not horrible aside from the load screens, which didn't seem to be that big of an issue for them, as it was for me at least. So the real question is, do I agree with the 5 of 10 score that IGN and Polygon gave it? No. At its core, the game is still really good for a Mario & Luigi game. This is truly the next step forward for the series with the new 3D environments like this. I enjoyed a huge portion of this game, and at the end, it was really only the performance and some funny quirks that Luigi had that bothered me. This definitely does not deserve a 5. Is Mario & Luigi Brothership a masterpiece? Not quite. Is it a disaster that some critics are making it out to be? Absolutely not. And honestly, I feel that these reviewers were rushed or maybe having a bad day. I get it, but these little issues shouldn't result in a game's downfall like this. Obviously, it's not perfect, and I think the overall criticisms were somewhat warranted. And unlike what the critics scored the game fits nicely in its Metacritic score of 79. I like the game. It's a fun, charming RPG with plenty of heart, even if it stumbles in a few places. The battles are fun, the music is fantastic, the visuals, while a little rough at times, still give off vibrant and quirky feel that the series is known for. before. Plus, the added features like battle plugs and some Luigi's logic, though not perfect, bring something fresh to the table. But hey, I recognize that not everyone will feel the same way. If you're someone who's been playing Mario RPGs for years, maybe you'll get a little burnt out with this one. If you're new to the Mario & Luigi series though, this is a solid entry point. At the end of the day, it's a Mario & Luigi game. You get what you expect. Fun, goofy adventures with our favorite plumbers. But now just with a few modern hiccups. It's not perfect, but it's proof that this series still has life left in it. But this game has too much water. Consider clicking this video if you want to see the rise and fall of the Paper Mario series, and please consider liking and subscribing and becoming a channel member to get your name at the end of the video. I hope to see you in the next one. See you later.